Okay, now it's time to bring in Reed College political science professor Chris Koski for some analysis. So, Chris, thanks for being with us. First question, what does the immense voter turnout say to you?
Well, thanks a lot for having me here. I got to say, it says to me that Americans are very excited about thinking about the future, the next 4 years of the United States government, not just the presidency, of course, but also a number of competitive Senate races across the U.S. And even here in Oregon, where we are generally speaking left out of the presidential contest, given that we're not particularly competitive, there are a number of local and state races that make it so that Oregonians are turning out at very similarly high rates as the rest of the United States.
Hey there, Chris. So now we've been seeing it with our reporters out there, and we're wondering if you think that last-minute push is changing any voters' minds. We're seeing people waiting in line to register in Washington, and in Oregon, we're seeing people just drop off their ballots today.
You know, I think that's a good question because if you were to look at the polls for both of our sort of more competitive local races here, but also some of the races that are associated with state legislative districts, you'll note that a lot of folks were pretty undecided before coming in. So, for example, in the case of the mayor's race, or even the case of Udaley versus Maps, in those cases, one of the most common responses, or at least the person who was in the lead, was don't know. So I think that with this sort of late turnout, we have a lot of folks who are really making up their minds in ways that are relatively consequential. It's not as if people are hanging on trying to pick East Multnomah County Soil and Water District. We've also got a race up in Washington, though, Herrera Butler's seat, which is one of the few competitive House races in the area, and that's also driving a lot of turnout. I imagine folks, when they're in line, are not necessarily making that choice, but they certainly have waited a long time to do so.
Yeah, a lot of money, millions of dollars spent in that race. It is early, but there are exit polls. Any surprises in the results so far?
Not particularly. I think it's going to be very challenging to know. I hate to say this because I understand that all news organizations want to do exit polls. It's really hard to know exactly what the exit polls are saying, in part because so many people are voting early. So many people have already voted. And one of the challenges associated with this election from a sort of a forecasting perspective, or from those of us who've seen many elections now, is that we just don't exactly know how many people, what percentage of people actually are going to turn up today versus have already voted in person. So the exit polls are really, frankly, I would take them with a grain of salt.
All right, and you're the expert, and you're saying so. It is tough to predict, so we'll watch everything closely tonight. Chris Koski with Reed College joining us live. Thanks, Chris.